Hello and welcome. My name is Emily Prieto, and I'm the co-host of the Seeds of Tao podcast alongside my husband, Joshua Prieto. We're also the co-owners of the Seeds of Tao education platform and incubator for regenerative entrepreneurs. If you're new to the podcast, this is a podcast for impact entrepreneurs creating regenerative enterprises. We often get asked what exactly a regenerative enterprise or impact entrepreneur is. So if you're wondering, a regenerative enterprise builds triple bottom line profits through the practice of ethics and principles that lead to a more inclusive, fair, and balanced economy. Impact entrepreneurs, or regenpreneurs, as we sometimes like to call them, are those willing and able to take on the financial and personal risks of starting and building regenerative enterprises. You'll get to know exactly what all that means as you join us for this and future episodes, but know that we welcome everyone to join us as we work to build regenerative economies together. That's exactly why we are here doing what we do at Seeds of Tao. Our mission is to help establish regenerative economies in every bioregion by serving individual regenpreneurs like yourself. In this podcast, you'll hear the startup stories in all their glory from impact entrepreneurs all over the globe. You'll learn and grow the skills of building a regenerative enterprise from your peers, mentors, and leaders. Finally, we'll get to know each other as you engage in the podcast and join the wonderful Regenerative Business Economies Network, aka RegenBen, an open community where peers, colleagues, funders, allies, and supporters of regenpreneurs come together to build and the regenerative economies of the future. Join us every month for a wonderful episode as we collectively move beyond sustainability and into our regenerative future. It all starts now.
Welcome, everybody. We have a fun guest who's actually living in my home state of Utah. We have Jesse Fisher on the podcast today, and we're going to talk about his story in building a regenerative community and what that all entails. And it's going to be a fun kind of get together and something that I'm really excited because we're kind of in the middle of doing a similar thing. So, Jesse, it's good to have you today. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you, Joshua.
Well, yeah. So we have this one question that I like to ask at the beginning of everything, because it helps set the stage for where you're at in time and place. But what got you up this morning first? And then what gets you excited to do the work that you do?
My sister would say it's my ADD that got me up this morning. She claims that everyone in our family has ADD. And I think that might be true because one of the symptoms is hyperfocus. I am hyper-focused on this project. So it's the last thing I think about when I go to bed. It's the first thing I think about when I wake up. I do say hi to my wife, after I wake up. But so that's what gets me going. I'm just hyper-focused on getting this project further along. It's quite a challenge. I've never built a town before, and now we're about to start our second town. We're just made an offer on some land in Arizona. So
cool. So that's wonderful to hear. Moving into a round two is always a good thing, right? Because you're learning from the versions of round one. And I'm sure we'll share.
And we definitely have learned some lessons.
We'll definitely share and get your feedback on that story as well. So tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing before we kind of dive into storytelling mode. Tell us about the town and what you're working on.
Okay. So the founder, Philip Gleason, had some traumatic experiences. Nearly froze to death in a trailer they were using back when he was doing some construction and had 3 young kids. And so that really, he says it rewired his brain to have to figure out how to keep his family warm when it was 0 degrees inside their trailer. So that, spring that forward 40 years. And he had this brain dump of this idea to build a community where everyone is producing all their own food, water, and power, and being independent and self-reliant, but a whole group of people. So you're not going off in the woods by yourself. Typically, wives and daughters really don't enjoy that. Men are happy to do that, to go off and be by themselves in the woods, but typically women are not. And so to do it in a community fulfills everybody's needs and interests that way. So the idea is create at least 200 families in a community, because when you do that, it's more likely to succeed and become intergenerational. So the community will extend on for 100, 200, however many years. So anyway, it's quite a project. Like I said, we've never been before, so we're learning all sorts of things.
So you've been working alongside this. I know you're one of the early founders into this community, and part of the reason why you guys are moving into the second town and really starting to move forward on all fronts. And you're kind of the marketing arm of this organization as well.
We were actually the 16th shareholders to join. Philip had come up with this lame 24-slide PowerPoint presentation that he showed to a bunch of friends when they were on the lake at Lake Powell on having a social event with their friends. And one of the second shareholder was there. It is an agricultural co-op, I should mention that, cooperative, not a commune. If the listeners don't know the difference between a commune and a co-op, I encourage them to go online and search out the difference. They're very different. Anyway, so I'm sorry, Joshua, what was your question? Don't get old. You forget the question.
No. It's still right in line with the question. So I'm just trying to get a sense of what your role is in the organization, and how we can go into storytelling mode now too, how you actually got involved with this project, and kind of why you got involved in this project as well.
Sure. Okay. Well, the long story, I actually, I was living in Salem, Utah, and I had neighbors. This was back during the last phase of unemployment, national unemployment. And I had neighbors losing their homes due to unemployment. And that really uncomfortable. And I had been reading an account of what I consider to be an economic miracle that happened in in Brigham City, Utah in the 1860s and 1870s. And I consider it an economic miracle. And what happened was, in case your listeners aren't aware, Brigham Young basically is responsible for settling most of the Western United States. He would send out groups of people to go and settle towns from up in Alberta, Canada, all the way down into Mexico and everywhere in between. And so he had asked this fellow by the name of Lorenzo Snow to create a self-sustaining community with a bunch of Scandinavian immigrants who had just arrived to Utah. And so they set up this town and named it Brigham City after Brigham Young. And it took Lorenzo Snow a while to figure out how to get started on this self-reliance, on this being self-sufficient. What he finally did was launch a co-op store. And your listeners may not be familiar with what a difference between a cooperative and a regular business. In a cooperative, the people who shop there or work there own the company. So you don't have distant owners from New York who are just trying to make a buck off their investment. Right. The people who are participating in the co-op, they want it to succeed because they personally directly benefit if it does. So what he did, he set up this co-op store, went around town inviting anyone who produced anything to sell their goods through the co-op store. the challenge was that these merchants in New York were bringing in goods, charging exorbitant prices for them, and draining the economic power, if you will, of the community away. And so the idea was let's do our own merchandising. And so he set up this. Snow set up this co-op store, invited everybody to sell their goods through it, and then and invited everyone in town to buy a share in the co-op. So the profits would go local instead of back to New York or Chicago, right?
Right.
And that would help the community, the local economy, keep the dollars local. So so then he went on vacation to Hawaii for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And when he got back, there was $10,000 profit in the savings account for the co-op. So he used that money to create another co-op. It was a tannery. So they take the hides from the local cattlemen and produce belts and hats and saddles and whatever else you make out of leather, and sell those goods through the co-op store. And so they just kept doing that over and over again, taking the profits, set up a new co-op, hired locals who had the skills to do that, and just kept doing that until in 10 years, after 10 years, they had 40 different manufacturing co-ops. They were producing, they estimated that they were producing 85% of all their consumer goods locally in town.
Wow. That's so
everyone who had a job worked for one of these co-ops. And the amazing part of this is, or the wow about this is that in their 10th year, there was a worldwide recession, 1873, I believe it was. And Brigham City had its best year ever. They prospered during a worldwide recession. They had 0% unemployment. And I'm reading about this and I'm thinking, like I said, my neighbors were losing their houses. And I was thinking, we should be building towns like this instead of the way we build them now, the common way that we build them now. And so I set up a website, set up a Facebook group, was trying to say, hey, let's do this virtually first, set up a virtual co-op store and sell goods that are produced locally, and eventually grow, just basically follow Lorenzo Snow's recipe and end up with the same benefits. So that was my plan. It was not gaining much traction very fast.
Right.
My doctor said, well, gosh, Jess, you ought to talk to these OSR people, Operation Self-Reliance. That's Philip Gleason's project, Philip, I was telling you about. And so he gave me Philip's phone number. I called Philip up and said, hey, I hear you're building communities. He goes, yeah. So I show up at one of the board members' houses, and Philip brought his lame PowerPoint presentation. And my sister and my wife came with me. My sister has had a strong influence on me in this regard since I was a teenager. And so we watched his presentation, and I thought, this guy's going to end up in the same place I was, a self-sustaining cooperative community. And I thought, man, I'm in. Where do I sign up?
Right.
So I did. So we were the 16th shareholders. At the time, they didn't have any land. So 17 of us joined the co-op, put up some serious cash to join this project before there was even any land. At the time I joined, they had looked in Wyoming, Idaho, and Arizona, and they had found some land in Arizona that was wonderful, I hear. But the family wouldn't negotiate on the price. They wanted something like $4.5 million for this land, and that just wasn't in the co-op budget. So when I joined, they were looking at land in Sanpete County, Utah, which, if you're familiar with Utah, basically the Rocky Mountains run up the middle, It's called the Wasatch Front, and anything to the left is desert. Anything to the right is green. But everything to the right, all surplus water goes to feed Las Vegas and Los Angeles.
Yes. Through
So
Lake Powell, where
you cannot get enough water to build a town in eastern Utah. It's just not available. It's not possible.
Right.
So they gave up on Sanpete County, and one of our shareholders ran across this property, which is now our town, Riverbed Ranch. It's an old alfalfa farm, 1,245 acres, still has 3 of those giant irrigation pivots on it, the ones that make the big circle, and 5 wells that we had to refurbish. Anyway, so that's how I got involved. For me, it's kind of the end. I don't know if to call it the end, but the culmination of a lifelong focus on how can we make society better than it is. We've got social institutions, schools, businesses, governments that aren't really all that human friendly. No. They're the profit motive is a good thing in as long as it doesn't get out of hand. And when it gets out of hand, it perverts everything. Yes. And so cooperatives, for example, I learned about those when I was in college 100 years ago, and was very impressed with what the Mondragon, Spain community was able to accomplish. Are you familiar with that story, by the way? Mondragon, Spain?
No. I'm just thinking of the wonderful co-op that we had in Bozeman, Montana. That was
tell me about that. Really not familiar with that.
Really well done. Bozeman, Montana, if you're familiar with the area, is a small town. It's actually a ski town, and it's similar to a lot of the Utah towns. But they set up a co-op and really worked with the local food producers and ranchers and farmers to build out this co-op and ingrain it in the community. The community owns it, right? And they do it does really well, right? And it's one of the first co-ops that I was like really excited. We while we were living there, we still have a membership in the co-op, even though we live in Panama now, right? So it's just kind of interesting that this model it shows up everywhere, and especially in small towns, it does a really great job of building up community. Sorry, go ahead. Tell me the story, because I want to hear this one as well.
Well, Mondragon, Spain, what happened was right after the Spanish Civil War, is that what it's called? They had a dictator at the same time Hitler was doing his thing. And this dictator had killed the priest of this small community, Mondragon, Spain. And so the new greenie priest came in, Catholic priest came in, and he was a mover and a shaker, right? Jose Maria Arizmendetti or something like that. And then he had a really long name. Anyway, so everybody called him Father Arizmendi, I think. Anyway, so he saw the local situation, and the situation was that if you grew up in that town, your only option was to become a miner like your parents and work the mines. That was it. And education was minimal. I mean, why bother if you're just going to end up in the mines, right? So what he did is he went. Okay, I'll give you the short version. So he set up his own school to teach other skills to the kids, and he got some grief from the existing school. But anyway, he set up his own school and taught them about cooperative free enterprise and how it's obvious, or to me it's obvious, but it's better than competitive free enterprise. And so the kids graduating from this school still had nowhere to go implement these ideas. But I believe it was 4 or 5 kids from the school set up, graduated. They didn't want to work in the mines. So they set up a manufacturing co-op. I might be getting my stories mixed up. Some group of these graduates bought the local movie theater and ran it as a cooperative. And then another group, I think Father Arizmendi got these graduates together. I believe that's the case. And they founded a manufacturing company, which is still around today. It's gargantuan. It's huge. They produce this region of Spain produces some huge percentage of the GDP of Spain. They've got over 200 co-ops now. They have their own retirement program, their own assurance program, their own medical system. They're just going gangbusters. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I think we should be doing here.
And everywhere.
Everywhere.
I'm so fascinated by the co-op model. And it's one of the reasons why you were sharing your community with me, and I was like, yes, I'm trying to do something very similar. And it struck my eye, and I wanted to talk with you to see how this all came about for you and your community. So here in Panama, it's definitely not something to see that type of structure of business, but you see it in community already, where people come together. This person needs to is selling goat's milk, or this person's selling this, or this person's producing, and this person over here just needs to be able to sell stuff at the local stand or whatever. And you just kind of see people kind of come together to create that type of situation. And if they were to put it into a collaborative, they could be much more protected and enriched together as a community, because they're already doing a lot of that same work. And so I'm seeing it as a model that almost every community can take advantage of. So you started early on. I want to hear some of the stories of how this kind of came together for you guys, and collaboratively. I mean, I know it can be hard to work in collaboration with others, because you get one bad apple and it kind of tears you down, or you get a few minds that are thinking this way and a couple minds that are thinking this way. How do you work through those challenges? And what are lessons that you can share with us as we might go into a cooperative institution or setup?
Let's take a moment for a promotional break to tell you about a course Seeds of Tao has just released in its beta form. The entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast want to see change. We want to be the change, and we want to bring that change. We want to change the culture from an extractive and degenerative one into a permanent regenerative one, a culture that cares for its people, planet, and future. This is the reason why so many entrepreneurs we talk to at Seeds of Tao start regenerative enterprises. They don't do it for the money. They do it because they want to see change. The challenge is that it's hard to build a business, especially a regenerative one, that is the catalyst for change. I often interview and speak with individuals that have managed to build a business and livelihood from their passion. And they often tell me that they wish they could do more, or they feel like their efforts aren't enough. They want to scale their efforts and the efforts of others, but they don't know how. Don't we all feel this way sometimes? We see our neighbors, industry, peers, suppliers, producers falling further into degenerative practices, and we think, I've made the change. Why can't they? How can I get them to change? We know it's hard to change, and for some, it's harder than others. We also know that we can't change others, only ourselves. We can, however, pave the way for change and make it easier for the next person to be that change. That path always starts with a story. Seeds of Tao has launched its first online course for regenerative entrepreneurs, and its objective is to help you pave the way to regenerative change through the power of your brand story. You'll learn to naturally grow and scale your business using brand storytelling and other inherent marketing systems that have stood the test of time. As you do this, you'll learn to do it in a way that influences change, not forcing change. No, we should never do that. It never works. Nor should we manipulate, even though it's an unethical way to make things work. Let's be a positive influence through the story and the message that we put out. The course is called the StorySeed, and it's the first of 6 initial courses we're releasing to help regenerative entrepreneurs build the regenerative economies of the future. The first 500 students to enroll in StorySeed will gain lifetime access to this course and the other 5 courses in our initial catalog. To give you an idea of what some of those courses will be, in addition to StorySeed, which covers marketing and messaging, we're building a funding and finance course and a course that helps you navigate the cultural forces and flows that you face as you create systematic and cultural change in your industry. On top of lifetime access to the Pando Academy course catalog, you'll be able to join us for weekly office hours, utilize step-by-step action workbooks, get discounted prices on other offerings, and other amazing benefits. This is a beta offering, which means you're helping us pioneer an education platform and accelerator for regenerative entrepreneurs. If you're an innovator and early adopter building a regenerative enterprise, come pioneer this with us by following the promotional link in the description or show notes and enrolling in StorySeed. Okay, let's get back to the episode.
One of the big challenges that we've had. So we just took a trip, 3 of us, Philip, Larry Jones, who's the chairman of the board of directors for the Utah OSR Land Co-op. Larry and Philip and I went to Arizona to look at this property that we've now made an offer on. And on the way there and on the way back, we're asking ourselves this very question: is what can we learn from City 1? Well, what lessons can we learn from that and apply here? I actually made a list. I don't think it's in the notebook. Oh, it is. I'll keep this handy.
Yeah.
We oh gosh, there's so many lessons that we learned. Holy cow. Let me think where to start. One of the challenges was that Philip invited someone to join the board before he knew the fellow very well. Come to find out, he's classic narcissist. And so the board was spending 75% of its time dealing with the imaginary crises that this guy was creating, because he had to be right. Everybody's his way was the right way, and everyone else was stupid. I mean, he literally used those words. And so that drug on for way too long. So lesson number 1, know the people who you're dealing with. Get to know them first before you put them on your board, or let them into your co-op, for that matter. In fact, Mondragon has this 3-year, in all their co-ops, you have to work for the co-op, the worker-owned co-op, for 3 months on a trial period.
Wow.
So your coworkers decide whether or not you stay or not.
Yeah.
We're thinking, okay, well, we can't really do that. If somebody buys into our co-op, they're starting to build a house and a barn and a greenhouse and putting in a well and solar system. You can't really kick them out, because you don't like them. They've invested all this in this community. So one of the challenges is getting to know the people before you make them decision makers. So that's a big warning for folks. In fact, I got on just the other day, YouTube. I was searching for, how do you tell somebody's a narcissist ahead of time? And the problem with that is that they're really what's the right word? They're really nice and social and helpful up front. But once you've in a relationship with them, then that's when they're nasty narcissism comes out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering, how do you do this? How do you recognize them up front? And so far, I've got two things on my list, and I'm going to. Philip wants me to share with him. One is that they'll say, "You're the most wonderful person. This is so amazing." They really butter you up, and then they'll say, "I'm your biggest fan. Nobody will ever be as committed to your program as I am." Those are two big red flags.
And I'm
which
sure
is
that
weird. You would think that would be a positive thing, right? And you'd want this person to participate with your project. But anyway, hopefully we're going to learn a little bit more about that and help keep.
So learn to recognize the types of behavior that would work against your organization before,
Right.
which may not look like, which may look the opposite of what's you're
so
actually.
it's quite a trick.
Yeah. There's a really cool book that's helped me at least understand the human behavior a little bit more and recognize people that I should avoid. The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. It's a really good one. I'm writing
this down. Laws of Human Nature.
By Robert Greene. And that's been a good one. There's been some other books that I can't recall off the top of my head, but and yeah, like Getting to Yes is another good negotiation one that like kind of helps you work through and find win-win solutions, right? Even when you have narcissists or people that are working really hard to be the winner in any circumstance, right? And so you have to kind of understand the human behavior, I think, is the first piece, right?
One of the human behavior is amazing. We're seeing it. One of the challenges is that when we started this co-op and we said, okay, it's going to take about this amount of money to get involved and to do everything you need to do, we had people joining. In fact, there's another lesson. We had people joining that we should not have allowed to join simply because they couldn't afford it. So it hurts them and it hurts us because they can't finish. They're stuck. Right. They sold everything. They've got out there in an RV, but that they can't do anything else. And so we started an interview process where Philip asked them the tough questions about their finances, which is, we're not used to people asking us about our finances, but we don't want people to get hurt doing this. We want people who can succeed at it. So we had to, this one lady, she, single mom, she assured us that she had the funds. Come to find out, she borrowed the money for the share price from her mom and had no job. And it's like, okay, we gotta make sure we don't. And so we sent her money back, cut her a check. Sorry. And that's hard to do because when you're doing a project like this and you see someone that's so excited about it, you want them to benefit from it. But if they seriously can't afford it, then you got to say no. And that's hard to do.
Yeah. That's a big lesson, I think, that a lot of us can take away from is when to say no, how to say no sometimes when it's easier sometimes to just say yes.
Yeah, definitely. So there was something else associated with that. Gosh, I miss my younger brain that could go on for hours just talking. Here, let me look at my list of lessons we learned that we want to. More training for board members. We realized we need to have some kind of a training program. This is what boards do. Most of us have never been on a board of directors for anything. And so we want to, this next round, come up with some kind of training program to help the board members understand what does a board do and what does it not do.
Right.
One of the challenges that we've had as a community, our community, So IC.org, Intentional Communities. There's an Intentional Communities Association that runs a website called IC.org. So the letter I, the letter C.org.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put up a description of our community on there. And loosely, we qualify as an intentional community. We're intentionally creating this community. The challenge is that most intentional communities are more like communes. They're more, which we're not a commune. We don't have any kind of income sharing program. And I get the impression that most people who come from that direction think of an intentional community as we're all voting on everything. Every decision that's being made, everybody gets a vote. Well, that's not what we're doing. So we had several shareholders freaking out because they didn't get to vote on everything. And it's like, okay, again, we need to be very clear to our prospective shareholders. This is what we're doing, and this is what we're not doing. So we're on our big long to-do list of things to do for round 2 is to create this introductory manual kind of, I hate to call it a manual, introductory material to say, here exactly is what we're doing, and this is not, and these are the things we're not doing. So I frequently reminding, oh gosh, I should be more charitable. I frequently reminding the whiners and complainers, this is a business. A co-op, this is a business. So we're not your government. We're not going to bail you out of everything you have. We're not going to, this project is called Operation Self-Reliance. That means you need to solve your problems. We're happy to give you some ideas, but you're going to have to do it yourself. We Americans are so used to telling the government, hey, here's a problem. You guys need to solve that. We're the opposite. It's like, figure it out. Figure it out yourself. You're capable. So, there's been some challenge with some of the shareholders wanting someone else to solve their problems, and that's just not possible in this setting. Now, what's been cool about our cooperative community, we have 30-something families living out there full-time now. I'm in the process of building my home from a distance. We sold our home at the peak of the housing bubble, which was awesome. And now we're renting while we build out at Riverbed Ranch. So there's 30-something living out there. Most of them are in RVs while they're putting in all their the well, the solar, the septic, and houses. And where was I going with that?
No.
So certain needs come up. People are wondering, okay, well, what do we do with our trash? Well, we've encouraged everybody to feed your paper products to your worm farm. Start a worm farm and feed your paper products to there. Well, that leaves the plastics and everything else that you can't really recycle. And so people have been taking them to a dump at the closest town, which is 50 miles away. We're literally out in the middle of nowhere. So just recently, in fact, they're still working on it right now. Several of the teenagers wanting to start their own business have pitched the idea of doing trash collection. And so they're going to charge, X amount of dollars per big hefty trash bag to haul it to the dump. Which is so cool. I'm so excited about that. I was an entrepreneur in the 7th grade. I started Fisher's Lawn Care Service and in the 7th grade. And so I've been doing entrepreneurial things to the frustration of my wife for 40 whatever years, right? Anyway, so I'm so excited to see these kids do this, take the initiative, see a need, fill the need. And that's happening a lot out there. So in fact, early on, we realized several shareholders, about 10 of us shareholders, realized we're going to need heavy equipment. We're going to need backhoes. We're going to need tractors. We're going to need big trailers. And so we all pitched in a chunk of money and went and bought all those things instead of renting them from 50 miles away and paying for the time to get them out there, pay for the time to use it, pay for the time to take it back. We bought our own. I've learned how to use that backhoe. I've rented it, I don't know, 7 or 8 times. I'd never touched a backhoe, and now I'm pretty good at it. Dug the foundation, the footings for my shipping container storage unit, and dug my septic tank hole, my septic leach line trenches, big pit to set my water tank in. Dug a whole bunch of lines for my water distribution system. Anyway, I'm getting pretty good at a backhoe.
Yeah,
but that's another example of our shareholders coming together to cooperate with each other and fulfill needs that we're having at the ranch, Riverbed Ranch. So that's awesome to see how that happens. In fact, we have a Facebook group sprouted up among our shareholders. Because we're way out in the county in the middle of nowhere, the roads are rock roads mostly.
Right.
Some of them are dirt roads. So between our town and Delta, which is the closest convenient town to go, do your laundry and stuff. Some of the roads between our town and theirs are dirt. So this winter and early spring have been very, very unusually wet. All those storms in California that have been dumping on California, well, they hit us next.
Yeah.
So we were having people getting stuck out on the roads in the middle of nowhere, right and left. So they came together, created this Facebook group where everybody's constantly saying, okay, I'm leaving here and I'm going there, and this is how far I am. Because if they get stuck, then some of the shareholders that have bigger, beefier trucks will go out and haul them back or get them unstuck. In fact, one Sunday where a bunch of the shareholders were headed to church in Delta, we now have our own, but anyway, they were headed to church in Delta. I think 4 of them that day got stuck. And so these people were out pulling each other out of the mud right and left. Anyway, it's so cool to see how these people are coming together, helping each other. We're constantly doing barn raisings and greenhouse raisings, and you just post on the Facebook group, hey, we're going to skin our greenhouse today. Would love to have anybody come and help. And 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 people show up and help them do it. It's so cool. That doesn't happen in my community, in my neighborhood here in town. So,
and I think we see more of that when there's more necessity for it. There's that story that's told all over the place about the gal that gets murdered in city and no one cries for help. Right in the middle of the city, everybody heard her screaming, and the attacker that's killing this victim is screaming for help, but no one helps, right? And there's a definite need there, but everybody is can pass that need to someone else really quick when there's so many other people that no one actually takes responsibility for it, right? But when there's a small town, everybody has to kind of know each other. And that need, it can only go so far, right? So if someone's screaming, help, 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 you don't look, you keep on looking to your neighbor. There's no neighbor, or there's, and if you're a tight community, you respond a lot quicker, right? So I definitely see that.
It's been really cool to see all these natural arising organizations that happen, informal organizations that happen. It's just cool to see. It gives you hope for humanity.
Yeah, and it is an intentional community. They're all over, and we gotta understand that intentional community does not mean, and especially for trying to do more of these, it doesn't mean that you are, taking advantage of that community, right?
Right.
That community has needs. That community has. You have to be giving as well as taking from that community.
Absolutely.
In a very balanced way, right? And it has to be its own ecosystem. So I actually know some people at IC.org, and Cynthia, Tina, I think we've had Cynthia, who's the marketing gal there, on our podcast, because she does like intentional community tours. But that's one thing that she mentioned, I think, as well in our conversations. I don't know if she said it on the podcast, but it is a give and take, and you got to understand that. And you can't have someone that's taking too much from the community and not in some proportion. I can't even say the word proportionate way. be giving back. It doesn't have to be directly one-to-one from this person to this person, but back into the community, right?
Yeah.
I believe it's the future. What you're saying is cooperative enterprises, and or we're seeing more of that working alongside some of the other institution structures that we see out there, right?
Yeah.
So I want to take us kind of towards the closing of our conversation, because there's so much that we can take away from building a project like this, and the questions that you have on when you're going into town number 2, and lessons learned from that. But as an entrepreneur, as someone that's really truly trying to create a regenerative change, something that's not extractive, that doesn't, you mentioned cooperatives being this a part where we're not using this kind of extractive for-profit entity that really just kind of sucks things from other things to generate their profits, but really collaboratively and socially, as well as using the land to do good things, right? The entrepreneurs that are listening, that's their goal. Sometimes it's hard to see that goal through for everything. What would you, from what you've shared today in your story, what would you say the regenerative entrepreneurs could take away from this story?
Well, actually, I was thinking about kind of a bigger picture idea. I think there's so much more to humans than we understand. I ran across this book back in 1996. It's called Wishcraft: How to Get What You Really Want. And let me tell you a story about this book. So my grandfather passed away in 96, and my brother and I were driving from Utah to Texas. I grew up in Texas, to go to his funeral. And I'm reading this book, and it talks about how if you simply, one of the tasks it has you do is to describe in writing the type of life you want to be living. So where do you live? Who do you live with? What does your house look like? What does your yard look like? What are you doing during the day? What do you do from Monday morning to Sunday night? Picture that and write it all out. Well, I did that on this trip, wrote it all out. I didn't set any goals. I didn't have any objectives to achieve this lifestyle that I had described. It was maybe 5 years. When would that have been? Six years later, I realized I was living what I had written.
Wow.
I didn't set any goals. I didn't put pictures up on my wall like the Amway people tell you to do on your fridge, I didn't do any of that. I just kept moving forward. I kept doing what I was doing. I kept searching for the things that were important to me, cooperatives and finding, I launched a private school that I think is a better way of helping kids mature, and freedom-based instead of compulsion-based. That's a whole nother interview right there. But anyway, so I think the lesson I would want to share with other entrepreneurs is our minds are amazing. It's actually, was reading this other book. It actually ties it into quantum physics. That if you're not familiar with quantum physics, they study subatomic particles and their behavior, and what they found just blew their minds. Subatomic particles respond to humans. If you have this expectation, they will fulfill it. They'll act like you're expecting them to act, which is really bizarre, which tells us that the universe and humanity are very closely tied together. So I think that's what was happening when I'm reading this book. I'm mentally creating this future that I want, and it just came about without me making any particular effort. So I did it again. Let me remember what the other occasion was. Oh, well, with this community that I wanted to be a part of a cooperative community. Philip Gleason comes into my life, and he's got this plan much better played out than I ever would have done. They had websites going. They already had the legal structure in place, all the contracts, everything in place. I just stepped into it. I didn't have to do it. I didn't have to set goals. None of this success BS. Okay. Imagine it, see it as being real, and it will happen. I think that's the most valuable advice I could give other entrepreneurs.
Don't be afraid, right? Like sometimes we're afraid to imagine, right? But you told your story, you wrote your story down, and it came in to your life because you were willing to think of it and move it forward. I love that. I think we could definitely use that as entrepreneurs in any circumstance, but definitely those that are building a regenerative future. We definitely want more people thinking about that regenerative future than and what it could possibly look like. So that's very cool. Have you ever heard of solar punk?
I've seen the word, and somebody mentioned it, and I Googled it, or I went on Chat GPT and asked, "Tell me about solar punk." That's all I know is what Chat GPT came up with.
Well, that's better than nothing in most cases these days, right? That's a really good description and a good way to research these days. So like that's, I think, a lot of what is out there in fantasy, right? Like science fiction, especially. The reason why it kind of comes true in a lot of ways is because someone is imagining that stuff.
Well, right? Look what Elon Musk is doing. I mean, the guy grew up reading sci-fi.
And what was the book that he always talks about? The comedy. It's like a comedy sci-fi. The one with the robot that says the answer to all world's problems is 42.
The British comedy.
Not across the universe. Something universe, right? Oh my goodness, I can't even think of the name. We're both spacing on it. But
I know what you're talking about. So he grew up on this diet of science fiction, and now he's bringing it about. He wants there to be humans to be multiplanetary species for our own safety. If Earth gets hit by another dinosaur killer comet or whatever, we get wiped out, then that's the end of humanity. Well, reading all these sci-fi books with these ideas of multi-planet settlements, and he's doing it. The guy's building the rockets to take us to Mars. It's pretty amazing.
It is pretty cool. I don't know that I want to be on Mars. I'd rather be here, but I think it's an amazing exploration of like how we can create and create something that we never thought possible just by through our minds, our imagination.
Yeah, humans are quite remarkable.
So thank you for imagining this life and going out and pursuing it, and thank you for sharing the takeaways from it. We'll definitely have you on the podcast again if you would like to, and share more lessons here. But our last kind of question is, how can we stay in touch? How, if someone's doing something similar, how can they get in touch with you? How can we understand your story? If someone wants to join your first town, second town, third town, how do we stay in touch with you?
Okay. Well, the easiest way would be just for me to give you my email address. That work?
Yeah, I can put that in the show notes.
Okay, so it's Jesse, Jesse, at academyosr.com. The OSR Academy is our educational nonprofit. I'm actually in the middle of, if I could ever get back to it, finishing an ebook called Matrix Exit Plan. So it's talks about how we're living in the matrix and how we need to get out, and how we can do that through off-grid living and other lots of other different ways. It's kind of a culmination of all the things I've learned as I've been throughout my life, been looking for more human-friendly ways of organizing society. And anyway, so that Matrix Exit Plan ebook, let's see, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to market it, but anyway, you should watch for that. Our Riverbed Ranch website is riverbed-ranch.com. And there you can watch videos. There's a particular important video to watch. It's about 53 minutes. It's where the founder, Philip Gleason, tells his story and then explains about cooperatives, explains the Academy of Self-Reliance, it explains Riverbed Ranch. It's really good overview of what we're doing. And I also frequently will create an update video. So that's it's about our progress. So that would be a good place to go. We also have another website that's going to be kind of the umbrella website for all 5 communities once we get all 5 built. And that's osrcommunity.com. So once we start announcing, we can't tell people where our Arizona land is yet because,
just an offer at this point. Yeah.
At this point, it's just an offer. But once we can, we'll probably set up some pages on OSR Community to explain that. So I can be found on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. Yeah, those are good ways to contact us.
Cool. Yeah,
email might be best, actually.
We'll definitely have some show notes, resources for everybody that's listening right now. To go to the episode, we'll have everything that Jesse just listed off here, and make sure that you follow along and see that journey. And if you're interested in living in these types of communities, reach out. And I really truly need to learn some more from you and the group that you're running with, as we build ours, and we could all learn from each other as we move towards those types of intentional communities. Thanks again, Jesse.
You bet.
And
it was fun.
For those I had a lot of fun too. So for those of you that are listening, head over to the website, and we'll see you later. Bye for now.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. It really is a blessing and a pleasure to bring each episode to you. So what'd you think? If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review or follow us on the podcast platform of your choice. Each review really does help us to further the reach of this podcast and move our mission forward to build regenerative economies in every bioregion. If you have a suggestion or feedback for us, please let us know in the open and free Regenerative Business Economies Network, known as RegenBen, which is linked in the description and in the show notes of this episode. RegenBen also has an awesome community request form that allows you to suggest guests, register to be a guest on the podcast, and share your own regenerative entrepreneur startup story, or any other suggestion you may have for the community. Without your feedback and requests, this podcast and community wouldn't be what it is, so please let us know. Now, this may be bye for now, but remember, it doesn't end here. It has only just begun. The regenerative economies of the future start now with you.